Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Rather than starting today by talking about systems or policies, I'd like to begin with a simple proposition. Inclusion starts with listening. If we want education systems to be inclusive, equitable, and fair, we need to understand education as it is experienced by learners themselves, not only as it is designed for them. Listening to learners' voices is therefore not a symbolic gesture, it's a core condition for inclusive education. My name is João Costa, and I am the Director of the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education, EASNIE. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to the fourth webinar in our Inclusion Talk series, organized as part of EASNIE's 30th anniversary year. Before we begin, just a few practical points. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared on EASNIE's website after the session. You can submit questions at any time using the Q&A box, and at the end, we will address as many questions as possible during the final Q&A session. Over the years, EASNIE has supported countries in looking at how learners' voices can be built into education systems at every level, from everyday classroom practice to how schools are run, right through to national policy. This work has focused on learner participation and well-being, on building more democratic school cultures, and on creating inclusive learning environments where diversity, dignity, and learners' agency are respected. Today's webinar builds directly on this experience. We had a webinar about teachers. We had a webinar about resources and financing. Today, I would say this is one of the most important webinars. It's the opportunity to give the voice to the learners. So we'll be exploring participatory approaches, empowerment in decision-making, and real-life examples of how listening to learners can lead to more inclusive and equitable education. Over the years, we have developed several activities on this topic. I would highlight the activity called Learner Participation in Inclusive Education that you can find on our website with several resources that have been made available. And I would like highlight the handbook for teachers, educators, and school leaders supporting schools in using participatory approaches. Also, our Voices into Action activity, and the more recent Learners and Family Shaping Action activity that is also already delivering some of its outputs. In the past, we have organized 4 European hearings to listen directly to young people about inclusive education. And this year, next October, we are planning a European Parliament hearing with learners in the context of our 30th anniversary that is being jointly organized by EASNIE and by the Culture and Education and the Employment and Social Affairs Committee at the European Parliament. Our work has shown that learner participation improves not only educational outcomes, but also well-being, belonging, and trust in education systems. Crucially, this participation must be authentic and meaningful. Learners' views must influence decisions, not simply be collected. We don't want just to listen to them, we want to act on what learners tell us. I am very, very pleased to be joined today by 3 speakers who bring complementary perspectives from EASNIE's analytical and policy-oriented work and from national policy making grounded in lived experience and system-level responsibility. First, we'll hear from Margarita Bilgeri, Head of Activities at EASNIE and lecturer at the University of Vienna. Margarita is closely involved in EASNIE's work on policy development and implementation in inclusive education and brings a strong academic and practice-oriented perspective with a particular focus on participation, intersectionality, and social justice. She will be followed by Bodil Hafsås, Policy Director on Inclusion at the Norwegian Ministry of Education and Research and a member of EASNIE's Representative Board. Bodil has extensive experience in national policy development within the fields of inclusion, social equity, and ability. And Bodil will be sharing her reflections from a system-level policy perspective. Bodil will also bring today the opportunity for us to have, I would say, sorry Bodil, sorry Margarita, the most important moment of this webinar. We'll also hear the testimonial from a learner, Sofiia Chernezhenko, I hope I'm pronouncing your name well, a student from Ukraine that is currently living in Norway, sharing a personal perspective on what inclusive education looks and feels like in practice. Thank you to the three of us for making this webinar happen. And without further ado, I will give the floor now to Margarita.
Thank you, João. I'm very pleased to be here today, and I will share my screen in a second. While preparing for this webinar, there came so many thoughts to my mind, and I had to pick, of course, what to present. Today, it's about inclusive education and learners' voice. And I had to make a selection of what I present. So I would like to start from the question of why listening to learners' voices. Then I would move to some of the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education perspectives, it's in short EASNIE, which then brings me to well-being and quality of life. And I have brought two examples to you that I will shortly present. And I think João has mentioned lots of the things already that you will recognize in my presentation now. So when coming to learners' voices and asking why listening to them, it actually leads us very quickly to the Article 12 of the United Nations Convention for the Rights of the Child. There are 2 points that are very important here. It's the right to express views and the right to have views given due weight. This can easily be connected to a model we have used. What you can see here, it's the Voices into Action framework, which is based on the Landi model. Professor Landi has developed this model for child participation. This can also be found on pages of the European Commission, and also, for example, Ireland uses it for the National Strategy on Child and Young People's Participation in Decision Making. We have used it in the VIA activity that João already mentioned, and you can find on our homepage many resources there as well to be used. So going a bit more into detail of the Landi model, I want to share with you the following. It consists of 4 different dimensions. You can see space, voice, influence, and audience. And as João has mentioned earlier, it is really important that we create safe and welcoming opportunities for learners to share their opinions. It's also important that we encourage learners and give them the freedom to decide if and how they want to express themselves. And I think here it's especially important that there is this point of choice, that they can choose to communicate or not. Then it's very important to look at the point of influence when it is about that learners should have a real and tangible impact on decision making. That means we need to consider the views and also give feedback. It's also about audience. It's about, as João mentioned, carefully listening to what learners say and to commit to hearing and respond to learners' views. So when looking at all of these 4 areas, I think it also becomes clear that this is quite closely related to well-being. Because as soon as you can share your views, you can voice what you think, well-being goes along with this. And I want to connect this now to some of the EASNIE perspectives we have. And this is about learner well-being and belonging. We have launched the EASNIE Pillars for Inclusive Education on 19th March in Brussels on our high-level event for the 30th anniversary. And one of these pillars is learner well-being and belonging. It's about well-being, safety, participation, and sense of belonging as essential foundations for meaningful learning. We have defined 3 key actions here. You can see it about make well-being and belonging core system goals, embed authentic learner voice in decision-making, and ensure access to mental health support, nutrition, and digital literacy. You can see that voice here is again mentioned and how closely it relates to well-being and belonging. We also have in EASNIE a definition of well-being and quality of life, and I want to quickly go there. It's very important to know that there are different dimensions of well-being. We have a social and economic dimension, mental health dimension, educational dimensions. So it's about different dimensions of well-being. Then also, well-being is very close to the notion of good life. It's about enjoy being. And furthermore, it's about the quality of life and not the quantity of skills. Last but not least, we also have a rights-based approach here. It's about children as active participants in defining their well-being and the ways to achieve it. And with this as background now, I would like to move to the examples I brought. And for the first one, I would like to take you on a very short journey to actually Ethiopia. I know it's outside of Europe, and I will come back to Europe in a bit, but I thought it's a good example because it shows you how education is also a value that can be a means to reach well-being and a sense of belonging. It's about developing a sense of belonging and how learners' voices help to understand lived experiences. This example is actually a research I did some years ago in Ethiopia. We discussed with learners with disabilities in schools about the barriers and facilitators they experience. And we had discussions with them. We had focus group discussions. The picture you see is one of the boys is in a special class for deaf children. He was very motivated and engaged in our communication. So, but I don't go into depth of this research, but I would like to talk about the focus on learners' values in the context of education. What we found in Addis Ababa, where the research took place, is that the children were not automatically in schools very often. So there was a long way until they had the possibility to go to schools. And for them, it was a very important step that when they joined the schools, they actually developed a sense of belonging to the school. Education for them was something that gave them the feeling to belong. They went to school like all the other children, which was the first step into feeling accepted and knowing that they are able to learn. So this is a one point that I wanted to share, that education as receiving education is also something that contributes to your well-being and to find a place to belong. And then education as a means, which means to, when you look into your future for the learners there, they said very often it's very important to them that through education, they will have a better future. They will be able to support their families, which was a very high value in their society. So finding a better job and supporting my family was one of the core values they had. And then in the end, also becoming a valued member of society and belong to this society. So the point I want to make here is that it is very important to look at learners' values, what they value. And this is also, of course, related to their voices, to listening to them, because it was really essential for them to receive education to become valued members of the society, which adds to their well-being and quality of life. They developed like this a positive self-concept, and the education led to a positive self-perception, which is related to their abilities and capabilities and possibilities to choose. This was very briefly from Ethiopia. I will move back to Europe and come to the learner participation in inclusive education activity we recently finalized in the agency in EASNIE. And we started this activity in late 23, kicked it off in 24 with 5 countries, actually 6 countries. The point here was that the countries identified a gap in data and knowledge about what happens on classroom level, what's happening in the interaction on classroom level, and also how do learners participate. They specifically wanted to focus on social and emotional participation. This is especially important because this is to look into social emotional participation. We will, of course, have to look into learner voice and see how we can get this information and gather this information. So we needed to start also to identify what we mean by social emotional participation, what it is when we talk about social emotional participation. What you can see here is a model that we developed for the LPI activity, and it shows you 9 items that actually explain what we understand with social emotional participation. You can see social connection, interaction, learning together, recognition, sense of belonging, as I've mentioned also in my earlier example. So what is really important here is that these items, of course, overlap and they complement each other. And also here, it is important, as I mentioned before, to think about the learners' values. What do they value in their participation when we go to school level and classroom level, for example, here? It's not about having the most or the highest level of interaction for everyone, having the most time to spend to learn together for everyone. It's about the possibility to choose. It's about listening to learners and understand what is important to them and what is necessary for them to be able to meaningfully participate socially and emotionally. There might be children who need a break from now and then. There might be children who cannot always collaborate, who cannot always work together, who need some space. But to be able to understand this, we need to talk to them, we need to listen, and we need to act on our findings. So what you see in the two boxes, it's about learner participation, inclusive education. That's the ELPI project. And more directly now to the focus we chose, it's about qualitative data generation on social emotional participation of learners vulnerable to exclusion. That's what we decided with the countries. We then decided that we need to choose a participatory methodology to find out about what's going on classroom level. And this methodology that we suggested was the photo voice methodology. And I won't go very much into depth into this photo voice methodology. I will tell you a bit about it because we will have another webinar actually on the ELPI outcomes. And I will tell you in the end a bit about this as well. So with this basis of social emotional participation, we moved forward, and I can show you one short slide here. And as I said before, it's about the possibility for meaningful social emotional participation, which differs for every child. And in order to know how it differs and how we can best support those learners, we need to listen to their lived experiences. What you see here is a part of a framework we applied in the ELPI activity, but I will not go into depth here because it will be very much explained in detail in the theoretical and methodological framework report we have that will be published soon. It is, as you can see, the possibility to choose is central here. And this is related to the capability approach, which is the framework I'm talking about, and which is a lot about choice and how to reach well-being and quality of life. But as I said, I will not spend more time on this now, but will refer you to the report I just mentioned before. I would rather like to go a bit more into depth of the ELPI activity itself. What you can see here is participants of the activity. It's teachers, policymakers, and data analysts. So what we did with the basis of the social-emotional participation definition, we started thinking about how to implement the photo voice methodology. Photo voice is actually something you can do in the classroom with learners. They will take pictures. In our case, it was pictures of the school, of places where they like to be, where they don't like to be, things they think are difficult for them. And then learners picked pictures and took them into their group for discussion. And this opens a door for really understanding children's or learners' lived experiences. They spoke about things they would not be speaking about naturally or in the classroom. They would not go to the teacher and speak about such things. So it opens this door for communication. Also, very often learners participated who would usually not raise their voice. And all these processes were leading to a trustful environment and had lots of positive impact already during the process. So what we did is that we prepared the teachers in workshops, and we had given them we prepared a handbook that was already mentioned by João, where we, of course, told them exactly how to implement this photo voice project. It is a participatory approach. That means that learners are involved from the very beginning. They're involved in decision making. Also, a participatory research approach usually is it needs to have, or the final goal actually is to have an impact and make a change. For this reason, we had to involve policymakers from the very beginning and decision makers, so they were aware of what's happening and that they could also be there in the end and throughout the process, so that the findings actually have an impact in the end. And I think that we in EASNIE, we are in this very in this great position where we have this direct access to the ministers of education. And I always say this when I'm working at the university, that this is a very good bridge. And you can see on the pictures that policymakers and teachers and also data analysts are discussing together. And I remember that the teachers, after they have implemented the photo voice, it was actually 9 teachers who did that in the different countries, who implemented that these projects. And they came back and discussed it. We met in Lisbon to discuss the project, the results, and the policymakers were there as well. And I remember these discussions and how interested they were to exchange on these things. And the end of the project were in most cases an exhibition. You can see on the very left lower side of the slide. This is the first exhibition that we saw that also took place, I think, in the whole activity. It was in Portugal, where we had the final meeting in November. And we all went there, and we were lucky enough to also bring the teachers who implemented the photo voice in other countries. And we invited to look at the pictures the learners took there. They had short descriptions also, and it was really nice to see what happened and what was going on in the school there. And we have lots of feedback that these activities in the classrooms had impact on decision levels in the school, and that policymakers also came to these exhibitions later on, and so on. I will not tell you more now about these things because, as I said before, we will have a webinar on the LPI activity where we have invited teachers, data analysts, and policymakers to explain and to tell about the experiences. Unfortunately, we did not succeed in having a learner, but we were happy to have a learner today. So I want to come slowly to an end. I will move to my next slide, where I just want to underline again what the positive impact of photo voice can be. And I want to also emphasize that photo voice is just one example. There are different methods and methodologies of how to capture learner voice. So on the one hand, photo voice empowers learners to share their voices and stories. And in these points that I'm now listing here, you will recognize actually the Landi model as well, or the VIA framework. So it helps learners to reflect on their experiences through visual expression. It raises awareness of social or educational issues. It encourages critical thinking and discussions, and that's what we heard a lot from the teachers when they reported back from their photo voice projects in their schools, that these discussions that started and peers started to understand what is the issue or what are the problems of other learners and understand also the reasons behind them. So it's already peer learning, and it's a process that supports this trust basis, and it's very, very valuable for the classes, for the learners, for teachers, for the schools, and finally also on decision-making levels. So it also contributes to learners' well-being and mental health. And here we have the well-being again that I started with. So it's about being able to say, what is my problem? Where do I have challenges and why? What can we change in the environment so I can have a better day in school and I can be better and feel better in school? Again, the relationships that I mentioned already. It also supports the development of social and emotional skills. And also it supports improved development and implementation of inclusive education policies because the project results are shared on policy levels. This brings me back to where I started from, to the space, voice, influence, and audience. And I think in these points that I just mentioned, it was very clear that all of these are included, especially in this photo voice approach, where it's a participatory approach, where learners are throughout the process are involved. They are involved in decision making. They can anytime say, I don't participate. They can anytime say, I want to change the topic. I want to have a different focus. And we have seen this as well during the projects. So actually, learner voice can lead to well-being and sense of belonging. And this is an essential foundation for meaningful learning. And to end my presentation, I want to say a big thank you to all the participants in the LPI activity, especially the learners, because they were extremely motivated and had a real good enthusiasm and energy, and it truly made a difference. Here you can say also save the date for the Alpine final dissemination event, where, as I said in the beginning, teachers and policymakers and data analysts will present from their experiences. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you very much, Margarita, for bringing this great reminder that putting learners' voices at the center as a rights-based practice strengthens inclusive education by supporting participation and belonging. We always say that there is no inclusion without belongingness and well-being, and you made this point very clear. And also thanking for highlighting methodology, because many times without the right methods, we may miss some learners that can be a bit more shy to share, and sometimes those are in the most vulnerable positions. So diversifying methodologies is really very important. I will now invite Bodil Hafsås to share her reflections from the perspective of national policy development and implementation. Please, Bodil, the floor is yours.
Thank you, João. Thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to take part in this inclusion talk, to share some thoughts on involving learners and some experiences from my country, Norway. Okay, so I wanted to start with the most fundamental aspect, the rights. As in Article 12 in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, states that children have the right to express their views and to be heard in all matters affecting them. These rights are also underlined in the Norwegian Education Act that states that pupils have the right to participate in all matters concerning them under this act and have the right to freely express their views. Pupils shall be heard and their views shall be given due weight in accordance with the age and maturity of the pupil. Moreover, these fundamental rights are also reflected in our core curriculum, with a statement that also underpin the important elements of child participation in Lundy's model that Margarita also talked about. Students are to experience that they are listened to in everyday school life, that they have genuine influence, and that they can affect matters that concern them. Having rights is a starting point. Upholding them is a responsibility of everyone who can influence the lives of children. This is just a quick reminder of the elements in Lundy's model of child participation that Margarita just told you about. And I put Article 12 in the middle to visualize that to fulfill the rights in Article 12, it's necessary to take all these elements into account. And all adults working in matters concerning children need to take responsibility for involving the children, making sure that they create safe situations and arenas for the children to raise their voices, and that they truly listen and act upon what the children say. And now to some experiences from Norway. To help ensuring learners are involved in all matters that concern them, it is important to establish structures and systems that frames involvement at all levels. At the individual level, there must be routines and procedures for listening to the child in all services in schools, support systems, health services, etc. And in Norway, the concrete routines are mostly taken care of at the local municipality or school level. At the school level, the Education Act mandates school democracy bodies, including elected pupil councils in every school at all school levels, represented here by a picture of a council in the upper secondary school in the western part of Norway. And these councils meet regularly and can raise questions concerning the everyday school life to the school leadership. And in 2018, the Norwegian Parliament adopted a new local government act establishing that all municipalities are required to have a youth council or another participation mechanism for young people. This was in fact a direct result of involving young people in the process of making the law in the first place. This ensures involvement also at the municipal level. At the national level, we have several permanent structures, in addition to ad hoc processes to include children and young people in policy making. After my introduction, you will meet the student that João told you about, and she will tell us about her experiences that are relevant for both the individual and the school level. So therefore, I will go into some examples on involvement in policy development at the national level in a while. But first, I would like to highlight that having system for student involvement is necessary, but not enough. Someone once said that culture eats structure for breakfast. You might have a system ready, but still lack a culture for using the system in a way that truly gives space and influence to the young voices. We, the grown-ups, need to consider our attitudes. Seeing children and young people as competent actors is an important foundation for involving young people. And our attitudes will also reflect in the relations that we create with young people. We know that good relations between teachers and students are crucial for learning and the well-being of the students. And it is also almost self-evident that good relations are important when you want to create a safe environment for the students to raise their voices. Taking children and young people seriously and seeing their inputs as valuable is important for many reasons. If we listen to them and what they need, the services and learning situations, etc., will improve, because how can we adapt and accommodate students' needs without asking them what they need and what they want? Moreover, if we want every child and learner to feel included and see themselves as valuable parts of the community, we must listen to them and what they think about the situation before making any decisions on their behalf. This leads me to a third reason why true learner involvement is important. Listening to children and young people, taking their voices seriously, acting upon what they say, is training them in democracy. I don't think there is any better way of learning about participation and democracy than experiencing it in practice. If the teacher in school or the politicians at national level truly listen to the young people and act on their opinions, they help young people building a sense of democratic agency and confidence. And in, for example, the International Civic and Citizenship Study, the ICCS, we find that political self-confidence is crucial for young people to see themselves as future participants in democracy. Therefore, it is also highly important that the schools create safe spaces for all the different voices to be heard, also the more silent voices. To avoid polarization and rising differences in participation in democratic institutions, we need all groups to develop political confidence and to believe that influence can be obtained through democratic processes. Involving learners in the everyday life in school, giving them the experience of democracy in practice, can therefore help students, for example, from families with low levels of education, from minority backgrounds, and so on, to develop greater confidence that they can contribute by participating in democratic elections and processes. This can, in turn, help reduce social inequalities in democratic participation and reduce the risk of groups feeling powerless and with more polarization as an effect. I will give you some examples of learner involvement in policy development processes at the national level. Learner involvement in such processes can be challenging. Policy development processes at this level often concern systemic questions, which are not necessarily easy for learners to relate to. It's a bit far from their everyday life. It's necessary to give a context and to frame the participation in order to ensure that students are enabled to provide relevant input. But you need to balance that so that you don't influence the inputs too much. This was experienced as a challenge when the Ministry of Education and Research created a student panel to inform its policies in a white paper on young people in school. The student panel consisted of students from across the country and of different ages, and it was included on several occasions throughout the process. The report from the student panel itself is included as an appendix to the white paper, and quotations are used in the document to highlight students' voices in concrete contexts. And considerable effort was invested, including in-person meetings, to provide a safe space and to enable the students to offer relevant input without being overly guided. And the ministry also cooperated with the National Student Organization to ensure this. You can see a picture of the student panel here with the Minister of Education at the time on the far right. And all these students at different ages. The other example I wanted to give you is from what we call STATPED, our national support system on special educational needs. STATPED has a system for including user voices, and an important part of this is the youth panel. The youth panel consists of young people pointed out by the main user organizations, and it has regular meetings with STATPED and also participates in conferences, etc., hosted by STATPED to give young people a voice in arenas with teachers, school leaders, etc. And STATPED had a very good experience involving the panel in the process of making a new digital strategy. They got valuable inputs that truly informed the project. And they also used a video from the students to disseminate this new strategy. But now is the time for introducing to you our student. I would like to give a very warm welcome to Sofiia Chernezhenko, who has immigrated to Norway from Ukraine. She's 18 years old and came to Norway when she was 16. We are very grateful that she is able to be with us here today and to share some of her experiences from entering a new school system in a new country. So welcome, Sofiia.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here and to share my experience with you.
Thank you. And first of all, I would just ask you what kind of education and school you have experiences from so far in Norway.
I had 1 year introductory course in Norwegian in Heimdalsskole, and right now I'm going to the high school Tiller.
Yeah, and how has your experiences been so far?
In introductory year, I was learning Norwegian by attending Norwegian classes, math, social studies, and science. In social studies, we were learning mostly about Norwegian culture, different celebrations, regions of the country. Also, I really enjoyed being in a class with people who were also new to Norway because it was easy for me to talk to them and make mistakes. So I was confident that I won't get judged by them. And introductory year just helped me a lot with being confident going to the high school where I go to now, because teachers from the introductory year, they gave me such a huge motivation to go to the high school. And I haven't finished the whole introductory course because it was a chance to go for 4 years and I got only for 1. So my teachers motivate me extremely just to go and try. So I wasn't scared at all. And at the start of the high school, I took a test in the level of Norwegian and I've got B1, so I felt kind of confident.
Yeah, good for you. And it sounds like your school had a good system for preparing new students for further studies. And could you tell us some about your relations now with classmates and also with your teachers at school?
Yeah, of course. My classmates, they are amazing. They're really friendly and I do not feel being left out at any kind. And from the beginning, I felt that I could always ask them the questions. And if I had the problems, they would always try to explain it in other words or just use English to make it easier for us. As for the teachers, I really enjoy that they always say to us that it's nothing wrong with making mistakes and that we're actually learning from them. So like it gives us the confidence in learning in general. And also we have subject-specific meetings with the teacher where we sit face to face and we can just talk about the subject, about what do you like about subject or not, about the tasks or about your grades, and you can get tips from the teacher how, for example, get a better grade.
Yeah, it sounds like you have teachers who are actually able to create safe spaces for you to raise your voices. But I guess that sometimes there might be situations where you want to talk with someone else than your teacher. Do you have someone else at school that you can talk with?
Yeah, at school we have social support staff. They attend our lessons. They talk with us during the breaks or the lunchtime. They ask about our plans for the weekends, and they help us for a plan for the work apprenticeship or work placement or any other thing that you ask them for. And everyone can ask them for help. So you shouldn't be a minority student or a student with special needs, so everyone just come and ask them for help, so you don't need to feel different to ask help from them.
Yeah, that's an important aspect of feeling included. Today's focus is including children and young people in matters affecting them. Do you feel that you and your fellow students have impact in your everyday school life?
Yes, I think we have, and I guess this impact is quite huge. We have class meetings each week, so we can talk and raise issues about what we're unsatisfied with. We also have a student council who have an influence over like the changes that are going in the school. And the last time I asked for cafeteria to be opened a little bit longer in the days when we're studying until 3 p.m. And now we can get food even after the school ends, so I'm really glad about it.
For you, and it's great that you were heard in that issue. You have told us about many good experiences from your school. Is there anything that you have experienced and that you think should be improved? Maybe especially for students who come from other countries?
As for me, like everything is perfect. So I don't really know what can be changed. And I also asked my fellow students, Ukrainians, and they also had no idea what can be changed. So we're just happy.
Well, that's good. But if you must pick one thing that is especially important for students in your situation, what would that be?
I think that's the support that we get. I think that it's really important because I feel safe learning and making mistakes, and I know that I will never be judged, and it makes me happy, and I feel like I'm just a regular Norwegian student, and yeah, I just feel confident going to school and
Yeah, thank you, Sofiia. Thank you for telling your story. And I think it demonstrates that, yeah, good structures are necessary, but that good relations are what really creates safe spaces and makes a difference. And teachers' ability to build relations with the learners, but also among the learners, as you have talked about, is, I think, invaluable. And with that, thank you, Sofiia, again. And I will hand the word over to João again. And thank you all for the attention.
Thank you very much, Bodil. Thank you so much, Sofiia, for highlighting how learner participation can be strengths at the system level, because we cannot live off individual happy stories. They are very important, but we are always talking about going to a system level capacity. And thank you, Sofiia, for sharing your positive story. Sometimes in inclusive education, we hear a lot about what does not work, but we also need to hear what works so that we can share ideas with the others and know that sometimes it's simple things. It is about structure, but it is also about school organization and setting the right structures to engage with everyone. Also, thank you, Bodil, for making this complementing Margarita's intervention by bringing together the word inclusion and the word democracy. Schools are laboratories for democracy, and there is no inclusion without democracy. But above all, there is no democracy without inclusion, because democracy is about participation. So we now have some minutes for questions. We already have some questions in the Q&A, and I will maybe group 2 or 3 questions, and then the 3 of you can respond. Maybe there's some question that is more targeted. We have one question that maybe Margarita can respond, but maybe Bodil has some examples from Norway as well, coming from Gisela, about experiences in early child education and care. Sorry, I always say that it's the best model for inclusive education is what happens in kindergartens, that children are listened to and they plan the day and they work in projects. But if you can direct to some tools or reflections that we may have, or some examples from Norway, it could be a good idea. And then a second question for maybe more for Bodil, which is local actions, but we want it to be a system level, a structure for listening to learners, and also to make it systemic. What I mean is, sometimes we have this one day in the year in which we listen to the learners, and then we forget about their voices for the other years, for the other days of the year, but we're very happy that we had one day in which we listened to them. So how do you see that we can make it a systemic approach? And then one question for Sofiia. We have 32 member countries in EASNIE. That means 32 ministers of education that you can be addressing right now. There are difficulties in implementing inclusive education. We're living these strange times in which sometimes there is not a very positive attitude towards immigration. So if you could use this forum to say a message to all the 32 ministers of education that are part of EASNIE, what would be your advice? What do you want all the ministers of education in Europe to do? So maybe I start with you, Margarita. We take the same order, and then you can pass to Bodil, and Bodil can pass to Sofiia.
All right, I'll keep it short because I'm looking forward to Sofia's input here. Thank you for the question. I think I can very briefly maybe say, looking at early childhood education and what methodologies can be used there, also to listen to them, to capture their voices. When we worked, for example, in Ethiopia, we worked with children also who had difficulties in communicating. We had, and I didn't mention that before, but we used, for example, we used cue cards, like cards with pictures that you can use. We also had Playmobil sets, which was very nice. And we used, these finger dolls, that so they don't they have to communicate directly with us, but they could speak to a different version of a cat or whatever. Just there are lots of these different possibilities to communicate with them, and of course drawings, etc. So we have these possibilities, and there's a huge methodology I know in academic literature about how to capture young people's voices. It's always a challenge, I think, but it's worth it. As you said, João, it's very important, I think, to start right from the beginning, to know and to maybe also make it normal that it's, that we can communicate with everyone, and that learners or children feel the trust, and so they are they feel they want to communicate. I think that's the main point, that it's a good atmosphere for them, that it's about well-being also for them, and they have an environment where they can say what they think and where they can say if they have problems.
Okay, so I will continue then. João, you asked about how to make the listening systemic, and I think that as I started with in my presentation, the rights are fundamental and they're really necessary, and I think that it's important that these rights are implemented in all documents and all structures that are supposed to, build up under the rights and make things happen from national level through local municipality level to the schools and the classrooms. And I think that we have done this in my country by, as I said, it's implemented in the different documents and also in the curriculum. And in the curriculum, we have some pillars, and one of those is democratic participation, and it's about teaching and learning how to participate and how to be an active citizen in the community. And I think that when they use this part of the curriculum, and also there is an impediment for all teachers to evaluate the learners in participation with the learners and listening to the learners when they organize the teaching, and also evaluate the learners in a dialogue with the learners. So I think that taking it from the rights and implementing it in all the different documents and systems and right down to the classroom is one of the ways that you need to make it systemic.
Thank you.
I'm also really eager to hear Sofiia now.
So we'll leave Sofia's recommendations to the very end of the webinar. I saw two other questions that came, and maybe I can even address them briefly because they are very general and related to the overall work of EASNIE. One question is about our experience in what we could say is the most impactful policy that we have seen internationally to ensure inclusion. This is a difficult question. It's made by a short organ. I would refer you to in our website to the document that Margarita mentioned on the 10 pillars shaping the future of inclusive education. One important dimension is that in order to have impact, we have to work in all these dimensions. They're all interconnected. So it's difficult to pin one policy that has the greatest impact, because these policies are all interconnected. So I would refer you to this document, and then of course you can reach out to us so that we can discuss it further. And we also have a question by Janelle Alexander. She says, I've worked in Germany for the past 10 years as a private dyslexic tutor. And if there is a way for students or parents to express their opinions and experience about inclusion, because often students are excluded from these opinions. I'd like to refer you, and again, to our website. There is an activity in which we will be delivering several outputs, but some are already there. It's an activity called Families and Learners Shaping Action. And there you can see as the countries that are participating in this project, in this activity, are delivering experiences and very practical tools to have the joint voices of families and learners. And so there you can identify and you can find some very practical tools that you may want to use to boost this participation. And as we are coming to an end, Sofiia, it's your moment to influence 32 ministers of education across Europe.
Thank you. I'm getting a little nervous here because it's kind of hard to find an answer that will be suitable like for all, because each person is different and it's hard to summarize all of us. But I guess for all of us, it's important to feel trusted and also seen, that our voices have the meaning, and if we say that something is irrelevant or relevant for us, that it's being seen and that the actions are being taken. And also I think a lot of students have problems with motivation, and we can be motivated by seeing that school is not like the place where you should struggle, but you should learn and see it as a huge amount of possibilities, and it's really nice to learn every day something new. And that's just my motto. So I think that
Thank you very much, Sofiia.
Each day should be seen as something precious and the possibility to learn something new without the force.
Thank you very much, Sofiia. You mentioned visibility, ideas that are actionable, motivation, school as a happy place, and for that you need several possibilities and not just a very strict and closed curriculum. These are very powerful messages and very important, and coming from you, they are even more important. Thank you very much, Margarita, Bodil, Sofiia, for your very valuable contributions. To all the participants for your engagement and questions. Today's discussion has reinforced the simple but important message. Inclusive education starts with listening to learners and taking their experiences into account when making decisions. They view school with their eyes, and they tell us a lot of what happens in education if we take their participation seriously. The recording of today's webinar, as I said before, will be available on the EASNIE's website and in our means of dissemination, the YouTube channel, also on Facebook and Instagram. We warmly invite you to continue following the Inclusion Talk series and to join us for the next one on May 28th. It will be our next session, and the topic will be inclusive education and school leadership. Thank you once again for being with us today, and I wish you a very good rest of the day. Thank you so much.